Welcome everyone to a wonderful, brave new world of social accountability and political correctness in gaming.
One of us.
Which one?
One of us.
How much did you say these things cost?
Oh no, wait, it's actually really f***ing stupid. Will a bad joke get blown up by overly sensitive journalists? Will a social media mob try to ruin my job, my relationships, my entire life? Will another video game that I like get called a racist for branding itself and then staying true to a historically accurate narrative just because people want something new to whine about? The answer to all of these questions is yes! Come with me on a journey as we offend a whole bunch of people and probably make no actual difference at all.
Did I just hear someone use a microaggression?
Today's video is a bit different, but I feel it's one of the most important concepts I have covered on the channel to date. The topic is social justice warrior bullshit infecting the world of gaming and painting a picture of where we are headed if we don't shut that down. To begin painting our awesomely offensive picture that's bound to net some pretty sweet hate comments, let's begin with a game that, as of this video, is not even out yet. Red Dead Redemption 2, the Western-themed Grand Theft Auto-esque open-world RPG from Rockstar Studios. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a highly anticipated game with a good amount of hype surrounding it. As with any hyped-up game release, there has also been a fair amount of teaser content, artwork, and other press material released. Among that artwork, and one of the first hints at the game in general, a silhouette poster of 7 far-off figures, all of which, at first glance, appear to be male. Someone call the outrage police, and sure enough, within a matter of hours, the first outlet to condemn the game and make claims of sexism was the Mary Sue. But this attitude was quickly parroted across social media by many additional keyboard crusaders. Now, I know what most of you are thinking, this is old news, and you're right, this happened quite a long time ago. But to understand where we are headed, we must first understand the past and where we came from. And this seemed like a logical place to start given its relevance. There have also been numerous connections drawn between Red Dead Redemption the original and racist undertones. Some believe that Rockstar has some secret nefarious agenda to push by including a character named Irish who is frequently drunk. Or that they are prejudiced against Irish immigrants and are seeking to promote that mentality through their game design. It's hard for me to communicate right now how hard I am rolling my eyes. Anyways, back to the Mary Sue article since that's the main focus. It is acknowledged pretty quickly by the writer that the original game did indeed feature some strong female characters, but that some others were seen washing clothes or fulfilling the roles of sex workers, damsels in distress, or innocent bystanders. But why doesn't the new poster have women in it? It's almost as if the author just wanted to complain and tried to draw loose, non-existent conclusions after seeing one image in order to get some clicks and views. The setting is the Wild West. Sure, it's historical fiction, and the main characters and their stories did not literally exist as displayed or unfold as narrated, but the setting, saloons, outlaws, gunfights, ranch and town life is more accurate than not. And to airbrush the whole thing in order to have forced equal distribution and never have characters, professions, or dialogue that could possibly offend people in today's hypersensitive culture would simply serve as an obstacle for developers and artists, which would hurt the game overall. Another article from Kotaku argues that Red Dead Redemption 2 needs kick-ass women to be a true Western. The article reads at one point, "Far from blindly continuing tradition, by excluding women, Rockstar will be betraying the genre." Yet again, I find myself struggling to roll my eyes hard enough to communicate how annoying and ignorant that statement is. Not because I believe that the game should not feature female leads or strong and influential characters, quite the opposite in fact. I believe that having diversity of characters is most often a positive thing, but because forced diversity is a farce and simply serves as a way to satiate overly emotional social justice keyboard warriors at the expense of the narrative, story, and artwork. To best explain this, let's take a quick look at the History Channel show Vikings. I absolutely love this show. Is it 100% historically accurate? Not a chance. Does it have a lot of historically accurate pieces, however? Absolutely. The show is great, and my all-time favorite character is a shield maiden named Lagatha. Lagatha is a hugely important character. She is a skilled warrior and an extremely prominent plot mover. But if I were to see a poster for the next season of the show that did not show her in it, or show other female characters comparable to her, I would not try to argue that the History Channel is betraying the Viking culture. I may like the show less if one of my favorite characters was not in it, or I may like it more because the turns they took and the direction they chose with different influential characters present may even be better. I honestly doubt it. She's a really cool character, but until a story has been told, complaining about how the story is told or will be told is just pathetic. Back to the Kotaku article. The game does not need kick-ass women to be a true Western. Would it benefit from having strong female characters? Almost definitely it would, but it does not need them in order to avoid being a betrayal of the genre. The author also argues, or tries to argue near the end, that almost every Western remake or major story since 2000, the year 2000, has had either a strong female lead or surrounding characters, and that Red Dead Redemption needs to stick to that formula. And I'm probably going to get some shit for assuming that the article was written by a man and saying he, because they may sexually identify as a jar of pickles for all I know, and pretty soon it might be a hate crime for me to even assume their gender at all, and used some improper pronouns, so I might go to jail. But hey, we're pretty okay with offending people in this video, so who gives a
toot?
But anyways, his advice is if Rockstar wants to make a successful video game, then they need to stick to that post-2000 formula. Trying to force artists, writers, and creators to conform to established standards is how we get stuck with garbage content being released. Would you rather a
poopy
story that had the socially acceptable quote-unquote distribution of characters and identities, but with everything else being terrible, or a well-written story that gripped your interest but maybe didn't have some of the characters you wish in your own head that it would have had? Personally, I think that character diversity can often be a wonderful thing, but trying to force companies or artists to conform and essentially trying to shame them even before we know if they did or not is just lunacy. Moving forward now, let's examine Call of Duty World War II. On April 26, 2017, before the full release of Call of Duty World War II, by the way, let's make special note of that, Polygon came out with an article essentially shaming Call of Duty and its developers for what they claim to be forced representation of diversity, which was nothing more than a marketing campaign. The article jumps from assumption to assumption, all the while pushing a narrative that an all-white production team simply included characters of color and female representation to mark off a checkbox and that they were not represented properly. The writer repeatedly levels insults at the game's creation team, essentially raking them over the coals for displaying any elements of historical accuracy, and that the inclusion of minority characters was forced, insincere, and tokenistic. World War II was a horrific event. Millions of people died and millions more experienced tragic and unmitigated loss in a war that will potentially remain the largest conflict in human history. Forcing a team of artists attempting to paint a picture of that time to conform to narrative inclusion standards has a negative impact on the entire experience and process. The biggest issue with all of this is subjective choice. One video game is simply not big enough nowadays to include all the things that people are fixated on, so you would have to inevitably draw lines and exclude certain groups. If you include too many white people, it is labeled as racist. If they are male, it's then sexist. But what if women did not serve on the front lines in World War II hardly at all? Spoiler alert, they didn't. Do you then include black people or women to pacify some of those criticisms? If so, if the answer is yes, in what proportion? During World War II, the majority of American soldiers were white males. So do you conform to that ratio? Or is it still racist because it's not an equal distribution and you didn't have a one-to-one basis? Do you branch off to sexual orientation, even though during that period there was an infinitesimally small representation of openly gay men in the military? Do you then need to include transgender characters in the narrative? Or the one man who is now a woman but sexually identifies as a rabbit? The list goes on and on. Am I now equally as offensive as Call of Duty for only listing these few things? Well, who knows? It's an entire show. It's like a truly never-ending handkerchief out of a magician's hat. Once you start pulling, it all goes to
oopsie.
If you stop pulling, there's still more handkerchiefs that are inside the hat and haven't come out yet. But if you keep pulling, you get so many that you can't put them anywhere. You run out of space and the entire magic show has been completely ruined. Call of Duty World War II came under fire before the game had even released for including a checklist of minorities that felt forced. even though the game was not even on the market yet and there was no actual concrete footage by which to judge the story. And Red Dead Redemption 2 came under fire before it has even come out for not including enough diversity. But if it had made that conscious effort and tried to have mass representation, it very likely could have been attacked just the same. If the writers, producers, and developers don't change their product to make every single consumer happy, they are attacked. And if they do try to change their product to maximize consumer multi-demographic happiness, they are evil for doing so because it's fake, and they are obviously only doing it to get credit and avoid scandal. Do you start to see the epic hypocrisy, idiocy, and flawed logic here? Now moving on, we have our third portion of the video, the most recent event and probably the most important and telling example as well. The game is Kingdom Come Deliverance, the cry is racism, and the result is what the Kingdom Come Deliverance is a Kickstarter-funded, independent title produced by Warhorse Studios. It is based in Bohemia during the early 15th century and adheres to a fairly strict principle of historical accuracy. Both in lore and mechanics, the game strives to do justice to the contemporary time period in which it is set. Your character will get hungry or tired, you will train over time, and the period-accurate combat system is both frustrating and wonderful to learn in advance. But with this dose of historical accuracy, the game fails to meet social justice warrior inclusion requirements as set forth by the great founding council of snowflakes and keyboard warriors. The game came under fire almost immediately after release. At least this time the game was actually
sad face
out though, seriously, for not including enough racially diverse characters, not including strong female leads, and promoting a racist white male agenda in its narrative. Multiple outlets began drawing lines between one of the game's developers, who has some controversial opinions about white supremacy, and the game's overall message. Other creators, reviewers, and journalists examined the bathhouses in the game, for instance, and concluded that the ability to pay for various explicit goods and services was a manifestation of sexism in the video game. Had the game been based in 2018, conformed to contemporary culture, and centered on the United States, then these claims might have been founded. Having no representation of African Americans present, or the ability to visit brothels in any town or city, would legitimately be a misrepresentation of society's demographic makeup and social structure. But 15th century Bohemia, it was a different age, a different time, with different rules, completely different statistical ethnic distribution, and these claims are ignorant, annoying, and detrimental to the development of video games. Likewise, if a historically accurate game were to be produced which centered around African culture in the early 13th century, for instance, there would be little to no representation of white Eastern Europeans, nor should there be any call for it. A game like that would offer a unique and likely amazing perspective which should be embraced for what it is and tries to be. It should not be pinned down and dissected next to a giant never-ending checklist to find every single ethnicity, religion, and sexual orientation that we have and continue to expand upon in 2018 and their equal representation, because it is not a factor that would add value to the story, and it would in fact almost certainly cheapen the game. Overall, it would detract from the experience by wrecking the historical accuracy, immersion, and development process. As we can clearly see, games and developers are attacked for not including enough diversity, both those that take fictional liberties, such as Red Dead Redemption, and those that don't, Kingdom Come Deliverance. They are also attacked for attempting to include a large spread of diverse characters, as with Call of Duty World War II, and they would be, and will be, attacked for everything in between. I recognize that this video is almost guaranteed to net me some negative feedback, but SJW culture has already had and will be further increasing its negative impact on video games. Before all the people I have offended have an energy drink and go ham in the comments section, however, I would like to extend an olive branch. Video games that promote racist agendas or actively encourage sexism are abhorrent, but games like that are few and far between nowadays. Since one single joke gone bad can result in a social media army attempting to ruin a person's life, a lot of people walk on eggshells, especially developers and other creators with a large audience. Games with a terrible message that are indeed offensive or harmful should be reviewed, called out, and action perhaps taken. Many may not remember the game Hatred, quote unquote, which was removed from Steam. But for those that don't, it was essentially a game in which a clearly psychotic protagonist, in a warped way though, since he was the main character but clearly the unconditional aggressor, committed as many violent crimes as possible. The entire game was this deranged man killing as many innocent people as possible because he despises them. There was animal cruelty and much, much more at play here. And the game was eventually removed from the Steam marketplace. I am not going to show live gameplay because YouTube would absolutely demonetize me if I haven't been already, but you get the point. Now, I disagree with the censorship of free speech in this case. While I think that the game is disgusting and glorifies gratuitous violence, I think that it needs to be slapped with, at minimum, an 18+ highly enforced entry age to buy or view or experience the game in any capacity, probably actually 21 or higher in this instance, but not be censored entirely just because many people would find it offensive. What I am all for, however, is the review process. Creators, journalists, and other media did and should review games like Hatred and condemn or showcase them for what they truly are: hateful and violent. They should spread the word on the contents of games such as this so that parents are equipped to protect their children, or gamers as a whole are informed as to what it truly contains and have all the info possible in order to purchase or pass. If some people still wanted to buy a game like Hatred, fine, but reviewers were completely within their right to express a retroactive opinion after the game's full release that it was and is unpleasant and offensive to many demographics. What reviewers, media, and creators should not do, and what SJW culture is unfortunately pushing harder and harder in an increasingly damaging way, is review games before they have even released, grasp at straws to label a game as sexist, racist, or discriminatory, and then attempt to influence the game's development and change the game to conform to their own definition of what is offensive or acceptable. Then, when games make an attempt to check off boxes in order to not get raked over the coals by the overly sensitive, hyper-drama-hungry keyboard crusaders, they get raked back over the coals the opposite way for being tokenistic and insincere. Because they tried to jump through these ludicrous hoops, they are then penalized. If you see a painting on a wall at a gallery, just to kind of make a comparison here, that you don't like, you just move on and you look at some different artwork. If you really don't like it though, maybe you tell your friends it's bad and they should avoid it. In the extreme cases, I'm talking the most extreme, maybe you publicly express your opinion to try and influence others to agree with you. What should not happen, however, categorically, is you go to an artist's studio before the painting is even done and start yelling at him to put more red paint on because his painting is offensive without it. Video games are art, interactive art with a narrative and a story, but artwork nonetheless, and to let overly sensitive, drama-mongering social justice warriors fabricate issues which will inevitably lead to a worse experience is damaging to the video game industry as a whole. We have seen the progression in monetization as kind of a parallel, from initial launch to paid DLC, to season passes, to cosmetic microtransactions, to progression-based microtransactions, all the way now with the new Metal Gear Survive title, charging for additional character save slots. It is painfully clear that these trends get increasingly more severe over time, and as with a pendulum, they swing far past a moderate and acceptable midground all the way to the extremes before finally turning back. The same exact thing is now happening with political correctness and social justice warrior culture in gaming. The SJW needs to get out of gaming. Bring on the comments, everybody. I'm ready. In all seriousness, this is a very, very, very different video to what I normally do. Thank you for watching, and check out the links down below to get involved with the community on the website forums, the Facebook group, and many more areas. As always though, I'll keep it brief now and sign off. Have a nice night.